Now, as we heard, if President Trump moves ahead with his plan, it would lead to secondary tariffs on countries still buying Russian oil, hitting top buyers China and India the hardest. Russia's economy has so far been resilient despite Western sanctions. Analysts say that these secondary tariffs could cut deep into Moscow's oil revenue, which helps finance its war in Ukraine. The goal is to ultimately pressure other countries to stop trading with Russia. And let's get more on that. We are joined by Stephen Beardsley, who's here with us here in the studio from DW Business. So, talk a little bit more with us about these secondary tariffs. How is this different? There are already sanctions on Russia. Is this really a big ratcheting up
It was confusing to me at first, too, Sarah, because we're used to hearing about sanctions, right? And secondary sanctions, some of our viewers might have heard that as well. Secondary sanctions are those sanctions that target entities that do trade or do business somehow with sanctioned entities. So traditionally, it's been for...
What does that mean?
Yeah, right. So we're talking about an entity here. Maybe we're talking about Russian state oil companies. Any business that's doing trade with a Russian state oil company under a current rules that are basically set up by the U.S. and its allies at a certain level of oil price will face sanctions. In this case, what's interesting is it takes this idea of sanctioning particular companies and it expands it to secondary tariffs. We all know how much Trump loves tariffs. Tariffs affect, in this case, whole countries, as far as we know. These businesses that are buying oil are not then turning around and selling something into the U.S. They're not being tariffed. It's putting tariffs on a whole country, which is something completely different. And I think that's what's interesting is that secondary sanctions, and the sanctions as we traditionally know them, target individual discrete businesses. This says if you are a Chinese company buying oil from Russia, then all Chinese importers into the U.S. will be hit. And that is actually a new level that we haven't seen before. And I would venture that it takes out a little bit of the fine-tuned nature of sanctions. So it'll be interesting to see how this is pursued.
That's very interesting. What do you think the impact might be on these countries?
So in theory, and we've heard some of our other guests talking about this, in theory, what it means is that China and India would be hit especially hard because they've been buying this sanctioned oil from Russia so far. And when I say sanctioned oil, let me be clear. The U.S. and its allies, including many European countries, agreed that oil sold above a certain price would not be bought by their companies, right? And that any companies that did buy them would be sanctioned. That's called the oil price cap. And to this point, it hasn't functioned so well, and Russia has still been able to sell to Chinese companies and Indian companies. What this would do is essentially, again, going back to this, it would say it's not just those companies that are going to be sanctioned, but any goods coming from China, a country where companies have bought this oil into the U.S. will be hit hard with sanctions. Any company in India that's trying to sell into the U.S. will be hit hard with sanctions. What's interesting is that the Trump administration is trying to work out right now tariff deals with both of these nations right now, which would then cut against basically the sanctions that he's trying to put in place right now. So they seem to be at sort of odds at this moment. What he's saying that he wants to do with this oil tariff or this secondary tariff and what he's been trying to do to relieve some of these kind of tariff discussions that have been going on in the background for months now.
So, ultimately, though, the goal is to hit Russia with regard to its oil revenue, right?
That's right.
So give us a sense of what that would be.
It's believed to be, throughout the course of this war, that oil revenues account for as much as 30% of Russian GDP. It is the single most important revenue driver for the economy, as much as we understand it. Natural gas, other commodities are also important, but nothing is as important as oil. That's why the U.S. and its allies have tried to put sanctions on oil to this point, this kind of Russian oil price cap. It hasn't worked that well because, again, they've been able to sell to other countries. And so to this point, it hasn't really done the job that it's wanted to do. Also important to mention is that Russia does supply a lot of oil into this global market. And if it disappears overnight, then oil prices in general could rise. That's something that sanctioning countries have also been worried about. So there's a lot of fine-tuned kind of dance that has to happen here.
What is the state of the Russian economy right now?
It's not especially good. It's been put into wartime mode for the last couple of years. It's been running really, really hot. That means a lot of money has been pumping into manufacturing war material, into pumping out as much as possible. Inflation goes up. The more money that enters an economy in this kind of hot phase, inflation goes up. People can buy less. It is a real problem right now. There's also there's not enough people to fill jobs, things like that. So there are real issues with the Russian economy. This could hit it even harder.
Stephen Beardsley, DW Business. Thank you.